My name is Dr. Austin Tay, and you are listening to Psych Chat. Welcome to episode 48 of Psych Chat, the podcast where we discuss work-related issues and provide tips on navigating the complex world of work. I'm your host, Dr. Austin Tay. Welcome to all new listeners of this podcast. Remember to subscribe to catch up on previous episodes and get notified when new ones are released. And to our existing subscribers, welcome back. Leave a review if you are enjoying the show. Your feedback helps us create content that matters to you. Today, we are diving into a critical topic that affects workplaces globally: workplace depression. This issue touches all of us, whether directly or through colleagues, friends, or family members. Let me start with some statistics. Recent research shows that depression and mood disorders are now the most common mental illness worldwide, with a global lifetime prevalence of about 12%. In Australia alone, workplace mental health issues cost approximately $11 billion per year. That's $4.7 billion in absenteeism, $6.1 billion in presenteeism, and $146 million in compensation claims. Today's episode will be particularly comprehensive. We'll explore how depression manifests in the workplace, examine risk factors and warning signs, and most importantly, discuss evidence-based strategies for managing depression at work. I'll also share some fascinating new research about how our mindset about stress can significantly impact our mental health outcomes. Part 1. Understanding workplace depression. Let me paint a picture that might feel familiar to many of you. Sarah, a marketing executive, used to be known for her creativity and enthusiasm. Gradually, her colleagues noticed she was coming in late, missing deadlines, and barely participating in meetings. This is one of many classic examples of how depression can manifest at work. Researchers Moon and colleagues have identified several key ways depression shows up in the workplace. Let's break this down. Number 1, performance changes. There will be decreased productivity, difficulty with decision-making, problems with concentration, reduced quality of work, missing deadlines or meetings. For example, a task that used to take an hour might now take 3. Or you might find yourself reading the same email multiple times without processing it. Number 2, emotional and physical symptoms. Feeling overwhelmed by the normal workload. Physical exhaustion, sleep problems, irritability with colleagues, loss of enthusiasm for projects. These symptoms often show up before performance issues become apparent. You might notice you're more tired than usual even after a full night's sleep, or that small workplace irritations feel increasingly overwhelming. Number 3, gender differences in symptoms. What's particularly fascinating is how depression manifests differently across genders in the workplace. Moon and colleagues' research revealed distinct patterns. For men, there are increased irritability and aggressive behavior. Greater focus on work as a coping mechanism. Higher rates of substance use, more physical complaints, difficulty expressing emotional needs. For women, more traditional depressive symptoms, higher rates of reported exhaustion, greater likelihood to seek social support, more emotional expression, and higher rates of presenteeism. These gender differences are crucial for understanding how to recognize and address depression in diverse workplace settings. For example, A. What are the workplace factors and suicide risks? Research indicates that specific psychosocial work factors are significantly associated with an increased risk of suicidal behavior. These include lack of job control, low social support from supervisors and colleagues, high job demands, long working hours, job strain, and workplace bullying. Studies have shown that exposure to psychosocial job stresses is linked to elevated risks of suicide ideation, attempts, and death. For example, sexual harassment, long working hours, and job strain are all associated with increased suicide risks. B. Occupational groups and suicide risks. There is a clear gradient in suicide risks based on occupation, with lower skilled workers experiencing higher risks. In England, males working in elementary occupations had a 44% higher risk of suicide compared to the national average, while those in skilled trades had a 35% higher risk. Specifically, male laborers in construction roles had a risk 3 times higher than the male national average. Females, on the other hand, in health professions, particularly nurses, had a 24% higher risk of suicide compared to the female national average. Male and female carers also had a risk almost twice the national average. In contrast, individuals in highly skilled occupations, such as managers, directors, and senior officials, had significantly lower risks of suicide, with corporate managers and directors having risks more than 70% lower for both sexes. C. Industry-specific risks. Certain industries are associated with higher suicide risks due to specific work conditions. For example, construction workers face risks related to job security, working away from home, and on-site injuries. In the police and fire industries, a macho management culture and exposure to trauma are identified as potential causes of mental health issues and increased suicide risks. The health sector, particularly among female nurses, and the culture, media, and sport occupations also show elevated suicide risks. Part 2. Understanding Risk Factors. Now that we understand how depression manifests in the workplace, let's dive into what puts workers at risk. Now, this is where some fascinating research by Zado and colleagues comes into play. Number 1. Working hours and their impact. One of the most significant findings from Zado's research is the relationship between working hours and depression risks. The numbers are quite striking. About 22% of the global workforce works more than 48 hours weekly. The risk for depression increases significantly at different thresholds. 41 to 48 hours shows moderate increase in risks. 49 to 54 hours demonstrate higher risks. 55 hours and above presents the highest risk. Think about this in practical terms. If you are regularly staying at the office past 7 p.m., taking work home on weekends, or constantly checking emails during family time, you are in this high-risk category. Number 2, Psychosocial Safety Climate, PSC. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Zado's research introduced us to the concept of psychosocial safety climate. Now, this refers to an organization's policies, practices, and procedures for protecting workers' psychological health. The research found 3 critical elements. Number 1, low PSC workplaces had 3 times higher risk for employee depression. PSC was actually a stronger predictor of depression than long working hours. The impact of low PSC was particularly strong for male workers. So what does a low PSC workplace look like? You might recognize some of these signs. 1. Mental health is not discussed openly. Number 2. There's pressure to work even when you are not well. Number 3, stress is seen as a badge of honor. And number 4, support resources aren't readily available. Number 3, work engagement paradox. Now here's where we encounter what I call the engagement paradox. Dedi and colleagues' research reveals something counterintuitive about work engagement. High work engagement was associated with longer working hours. The relationship was stronger for men than women. While engagement is generally positive, excessive engagement could lead to burnout. Their key finding was engagement needs to be balanced with boundaries. Number 4, organizational risk factors. Now, the research also identifies several organizational factors that increase depression risks. For example, structural factors. When there are unclear job roles and expectations, limited control over work processes, high job demands with low resources, insufficient staffing levels. Then we have cultural factors, competitive work environments, lack of social support, poor communication channels, limited recognition and feedback. Number 5, individual risk factors. Finally, Zador's research identified personal factors that can increase vulnerability. For example, previous history of mental health issues, high personal standards, difficulty setting boundaries, limited support networks outside work, and lastly, poor stress management skills. Part 3. The role of stress mindset. Now we're going to explore one of the most fascinating aspects of workplace depression. How our mindset about stress can significantly impact our mental health. This comes from research by Hutzman and Sheets, and it might change how you think about workplace stress entirely. Number 1, understanding stress mindset. Let's start with what stress mindset actually means. It's not just about how much stress you're under, but rather your fundamental beliefs about what stress does to you. The researchers identified 2 distinct mindsets. Number 1, stress is enhancing mindset. Think of this as the growth perspective. Views stress as an opportunity for learning, sees challenges as chances to develop new skills, believes pressure can improve performance, and lastly, associates stress with personal development. Number 2, stress is debilitating mindset. Now, this is the threat perspective. Views stress as inherently harmful, sees challenges as potential dangers, believes pressure undermines performance, and lastly, associates stress with illness and breakdown. Number 2, the impact of mindset. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The research found that people with the same level of stress had very different outcomes depending on their mindset. The research showed that those with a stress is enhancing mindset were significantly less likely to develop depression under high stress. The protective effect was strongest during periods of peak stress. The mindset impact remained significant even when controlling for other factors. Number 3, the biological connection. The researchers found that mindset doesn't just affect our thoughts, it impacts our physical stress response. Stress is enhancing mindset was associated with better cardiovascular responses. People with this mindset showed more adaptive cortisol patterns. They demonstrated better recovery after stressful events. Number 4, cultural and gender differences. Interestingly, the research revealed some notable patterns. Men were more likely to adopt a stress is debilitating mindset in workplace settings. Women show more flexibility in switching between mindsets. Cultural factors influence how people typically viewed stress. Well, the good news is, mindset seems to be malleable. Perhaps the most empowering finding is that stress mindset can be changed. The research showed that brief interventions can shift stress mindset. Changes in mindset led to improved outcomes, and lastly, the effects could be maintained over time with practice. Part 4. Evidence-based management strategies. Now that we understand the role of stress mindset, let's dive into practical research-backed strategies for managing workplace depression. Drawing from our key studies, we'll look at this from multiple angles. Number 1. Organizational level strategies. Research by Zadel and colleagues identified several effective organizational approaches, and they are: working hour management. Implement clear policies on maximum working hours. Create symptoms to track and monitor over time. Establish right to disconnect policies after work hours. Regular workload reviews and adjustments. Psychosocial safety climate development. Train managers in mental health awareness. Create clear mental health support pathways. Develop psychological safety in teams. Regular workplace well-being assessments. Dedi and colleagues' research on workplace mental health apps showed promising results. Key features of effective digital tools. They should have daily mood tracking, stress management exercises, work-life boundary setting tools, connection to professional support, and peer support networks. Their research found that employees using these tools showed 47.5% reported improved mental fitness, significant reductions in depressive symptoms, better engagement with work, and improved stress management skills. Number 3, individual strategies. Based on Huseman and Sheets' stress mindset research, mindset development. Practice reframing stress as a challenge rather than threat. Keep a stress growth journal. Identify learning opportunities in difficult situations. Share success stories with colleagues. Practical work habits. Set clear work boundaries. Take regular breaks. Create end-of-day rituals. And maintain a consistent sleep schedule. Number 4, manager-level interventions. Moon and colleagues' research highlighted the importance of leadership approaches, supportive management practices, regular one-on-one check-ins, flexible work arrangements, clear communication about expectations, recognition of good work, and early intervention when issues arise. Creating safe spaces, open dialogue about mental health, normalized discussion of work pressures, clear paths for seeking help, and protection from stigma. Number 5, integrated approach. Now, the research suggests that most effective approach combines multiple strategies. A comprehensive framework, organization-wide policies and support, team-level interventions, individual support tools, regular assessment and adjustment, professional support when needed. Part 5. Implementation and monitoring. Now that we've covered the strategies, let's talk about how to implement them effectively and monitor their success. This is crucial because even the best strategies fail without proper implementation. Number 1. Starting small. Now, research by Dady and colleagues shows that gradual implementation is most effective. For example, week 1 or 2, choose one primary strategy to focus on. Set specific measurable goals, document your starting point, identify potential obstacles. Week 3 to 4, add a second complementary strategy. Review and adjust your first strategy. Build support networks. Track progress. Measuring progress. Now, based on the research method used across our studies, here are effective ways to monitor progress. 1. Daily tracking. Your mood and energy levels, working hours, stress levels, sleep quality, productivity measures. Weekly assessment, work satisfaction, energy levels, social connections, stress management success, goal achievement. It is also very important to remember that sometimes we need to adjust our own approach. Now, research shows that successful implementation requires regular review of strategies, flexibility in approach, willingness to modify methods, openness to feedback, and lastly, persistent through setbacks. Now, before we wrap up today's episode, I want to provide you with some takeaways and action steps that you can implement right away based on the research that I've shared in this episode. Number 1, for employees, what are the actions that you can take? Start tracking your working hours. If you're consistently over 48 hours weekly, this is your red flag. Assess your stress mindset using the simple question: do I view stress as helpful or harmful? Download and try a workplace mental health app. Well, research shows that they can be effective tools. Create for yourself a mental health toolkit with 3 to 4 reliable coping strategies. Weekly goals can include schedule regular breaks during work days, set firm boundaries for work hours, practice stress reframing exercises, and connect with supportive colleagues. Now, for managers, some of the actions that can be taken immediately can include reviewing your team's working patterns. Look for those regularly working long hours. Implement regular one-on-one check-ins focusing on well-being and not just performance. Create clear policies about after-hours communication. Develop a resource list for mental health support. Leadership practices. As a leader, you can practice modeling healthy work-life boundaries, normalize conversations about mental health, provide flexible work arrangements where possible, recognize and reward balanced working habits. For organization, based on Zador's and colleagues' finding, measure your organization's psychosocial safety climate. Implement policies limiting excessive working hours. Provide mental health first aid training for managers. Create clear pathways for assessing mental health support. Regularly assess workplace stress levels and take action on findings. And lastly, for everyone else, some of the daily practices that we could actually be doing include viewing stress as an opportunity for growth rather than a threat, set clear boundaries between work and personal time, practice daily stress management techniques, build a support network at work and outside. Some of the warning signs to watch out for include consistent overtime work, sleep disturbances, changes in work performance, increased irritability, and social withdrawal. Remember, these changes don't need to happen all at once. Start with what feels most manageable and build from there. Research shows that even small changes can have significant positive impacts on mental health outcomes. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to emphasize some crucial points about workplace depression. First, remember that depression is a complex condition that often requires professional help. While the workplace strategies we've discussed today are important and effective, they should complement, not replace, professional mental health care. The research we've covered from Dedi and colleague shows that multiple approaches, both professional and workplace-based, often work best together. Secondly, the research by Zador and colleague makes it clear that workplace depression isn't just an individual issue. It's a systemic one. Organizations have a crucial role to play in creating environments that support mental health. If you are in a leadership position, remember that investing in psychological safety and reasonable working hours isn't just good for employees, it's good for business too. Third, Hushman and Sheets' research on stress mindset gives us hope. We can change how we think about and respond to stress, and these changes can have real, meaningful impacts on our mental health. Finally, if you are struggling with depression, please know that you are not alone. The statistics we've discussed at the start of the episode tells us that this is a common experience, especially in today's demanding work environment. Reaching out for help, whether to a mental health professional, your employee assistance program, or a trusted colleague is a sign of strength, not weakness. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Side Chat. If you have any comments or suggestions, please send them to sidechat@omnisci.com or tweet to site_chat. You have been listening to Side Chat. This podcast is brought to you by Omnisci Consulting. We are a team of psychologists with a wealth of experience working with individuals, teams, and organizations in coaching, executive selection, assessment and development, career transitioning, and workplace intervention. Omnisci Consulting exists to solve the critical issues facing our clients, both large and small. Our approach is to tailor-make each service to meet the requirements of our clients. Our broad range of services and solutions helps individuals and organizations to facilitate change, achieve their vision, and optimize performance and productivity.